12-year-old Sofia Mendoza stood in her grandmother's garden on that scorching August afternoon, tears streaming down her face as she hurled stone after stone at the marble statue of the Virgin Mary. Each rock struck the serene face with a sharp crack that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. "You don't listen!" she screamed, her voice breaking with rage and heartbreak. "I prayed every night for 2 years, and you did nothing. Nothing." The final stone chipped the statue's extended hand, the same hand that had once seemed to offer comfort and hope. Just 6 hours earlier, Sofia's world had completely collapsed. Her parents had sat her down in their cramped apartment living room to deliver the news she'd been dreading, but somehow still wasn't prepared to hear. The divorce was final. Her father would be moving to Phoenix for a new job. Her mother could no longer afford their home. They would be moving in with Grandmama Elena, at least until things stabilized. Sofia had run straight to her grandmother's house not to seek comfort, but to confront the statue that had failed her so completely. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. Now, if you're watching this story unfold, I want you to do something. Write in the comments where you're watching from and add these words: broken but blessed. Let's see how far this message of hope can reach around the world tonight. Grandmama Elena found Sofia an hour later, sitting on the garden bench, staring at the damaged statue with empty eyes. The elderly woman's weathered hands trembled as she surveyed the chips and scratches on the sacred image she'd treasured for 30 years. But instead of anger, her voice held only gentle sadness. "Mija, she understands your pain," Elena whispered, kneeling beside her granddaughter. "Sometimes we have to break before we can be made whole again." Sofia turned away, her heart too shattered to accept any comfort, divine or otherwise. That night, as the Mendoza family slept in Elena's small guest rooms, something extraordinary began. Sofia jolted awake at 2:47 a.m., her heart pounding with inexplicable terror. The smell of smoke filled her nostrils. Though she could see no flames, an urgent voice seemed to whisper in her mind, not with words, but with overwhelming certainty. "Get them out. Now. All of them." Still half asleep but driven by panic she couldn't explain, Sofia ran through the house, shaking everyone awake. Her mother, Maria, was confused and irritated. "Sofia, what are you—" But before she could finish, the piercing shriek of smoke detectors filled the house. Elena's ancient electrical system had sparked a fire behind the kitchen wall, and toxic smoke was already filling the rooms where they'd been sleeping. By the time firefighters arrived, the kitchen was engulfed in flames. Fire Chief Rodriguez would later tell them that without Sofia's early warning, the family would likely have succumbed to smoke inhalation in their sleep. The old house's layout had created a deadly trap, with smoke filling the bedrooms before anyone would have naturally awakened. As Sofia watched the flames consume her grandmother's kitchen, one terrifying question burned in her mind. How had she known? Elena Mendoza had carved that statue herself 43 years earlier, back when her arthritis-free hands could still shape marble with the precision of a master craftsman. Fresh from her wedding to Roberto, she'd spent 6 months creating what she called her prayer garden centerpiece, a 3-foot-tall Virgin Mary with arms extended in welcome, her face capturing an expression of infinite mercy that seemed to change depending on the light and the viewer's need. Elena had positioned the statue in the garden's heart, surrounded by roses that bloomed in impossible abundance each spring, as if blessed by the sacred presence. For Sofia, that garden had been paradise. As a little girl, she'd spent countless afternoons sitting cross-legged before the statue, while Elena taught her the rosary in Spanish, their voices weaving together in ancient prayers. "Mira, Mija," Elena would whisper, pointing to the statue's serene face. "She sees everything, your joys, your fears, your secret dreams. She carries them all to her son." Sofia believed with the pure faith of childhood, decorating the statue's base with wildflowers and whispering her hopes to the marble ears she was certain could hear every word. The devotion had only deepened as Sofia grew older. When nightmares plagued her at age 7, Elena would lead her to the garden by moonlight, lighting candles around the statue while they prayed for peaceful sleep. When Sofia struggled with math in 4th grade, she'd study at the small stone bench Elena had placed facing the shrine, somehow finding clarity in the statue's peaceful presence. The Virgin Mary wasn't just a religious figure to Sofia. She was family, confidant, the eternal mother who would always listen and always care. But then came the fighting. Late-night arguments that pierced through Sofia's bedroom walls, her parents' voices sharp with accusations and hurt. Sofia prayed harder, kneeling before the statue until her knees ached, bargaining with heaven. "Please," she'd whisper, pressing her palms against the cool marble base. "Don't let them break our family. I'll be good forever. I'll never ask for anything else." She'd begun a novena, 9 days of dedicated prayer, certain that such devotion would move the Virgin's heart to intervene. The arguments grew worse. Her father started sleeping in the guest room. Her mother cried quietly while washing dishes, thinking no one noticed. Sofia's prayers became desperate pleas, her child's faith stretched to breaking as she watched her world crumble despite her fervent devotion. On the final night before her parents' announcement, she'd spent 3 hours in the garden, tears streaming as she begged the statue to perform the miracle that would save her family. But the next morning brought only the crushing news that her prayers had fallen on deaf ears. The divorce was final. The family was broken, and Sofia's faith, built over years of answered prayers and gentle guidance, shattered like glass against the cold reality that sometimes, no matter how pure your heart or how sincere your pleas, the heavens remain silent. Now, as the family prepared to live in Elena's small house while rebuilding their lives, that same garden held only bitter memories. Yet the damaged statue continued to stand among the roses, waiting with marble patience for something Sofia couldn't yet understand. That sometimes the most profound answers come only after we've stopped asking the questions. 3 weeks passed in uncomfortable silence. Sofia avoided the garden entirely, taking the long way around Elena's house to reach the front door, rather than glimpse the statue she damaged in her rage. Elena had lovingly cleaned the chips and scratches, but the scars remained visible, a constant reminder of Sofia's crisis of faith. The family settled into their new, cramped routine, tiptoeing around each other's grief while trying to rebuild what felt irreparably broken. It was on a humid Tuesday morning that the second impossible thing happened. Sofia was helping Elena sort through her grandmother's extensive collection of medications when something cold and urgent seized her chest. Elena reached for her blood pressure pills, the same prescription she'd taken faithfully for 8 years, but Sofia's hand shot out instinctively to stop her. "Wait!" Sofia gasped, her voice tight with inexplicable panic. "Something's wrong with those." Elena paused, pill bottle halfway to her lips, studying her granddaughter's pale face. "Mija, what are you talking about? These are the same pills I always take." But Sofia's grip on Elena's wrist was surprisingly strong, her 12-year-old fingers trembling with certainty she couldn't explain. "Please, Grandmama, don't take them. Something's different. Something's dangerous." The words spilled out of Sofia without her conscious permission, as if spoken by someone else entirely. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. Eleanor's weathered hand trembled as she set down the bottle. In 67 years of life, she'd learned to trust inexplicable intuitions, especially from the children she loved. "All right, Mija, we'll call Dr. Martinez just to be sure." The phone call to the pharmacy revealed what should have been impossible for a child to know. There had been a critical error. Sofia's urgent warning had prevented Elena from taking pills that were nearly double the prescribed dosage, a mistake that could have sent her blood pressure dangerously low and potentially triggered a heart episode. Maria watched from the doorway as Sofia collapsed into a kitchen chair, her face drained of color and her hands shaking uncontrollably. "How did you know?" her mother whispered, kneeling beside her daughter. "How could you possibly have known?" Sofia shook her head helplessly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know, Mama. I just felt it, like something was screaming inside me to stop her, like someone was warning me." That evening, as Eleanor tucked Sofia into bed, the elderly woman's eyes were bright with wonder and concern. "Misha, sometimes when we're broken open by pain, we become vessels for something greater than ourselves." She smoothed Sofia's dark hair away from her troubled face. "The Virgin Mary knows your heart is hurting. Maybe she's showing you that even when we feel abandoned, we're never truly alone." But Sofia turned toward the wall, pulling her blanket over her head. She didn't want to be anyone's vessel. She didn't want mysterious warnings or impossible knowledge. She just wanted her family back together and her faith to make sense again. Yet deep in her heart, a terrifying question was taking root. If the Virgin Mary was truly speaking to her, what other warnings might be coming? Sofia's father, Carlos, had been gone for 2 weeks on his new job in Phoenix, their phone conversations strained and brief. The divorce had driven a wedge between them that neither knew how to bridge. He was drowning in guilt. She was suffocating in resentment. But on a stormy Friday evening in September, something far beyond their fractured relationship was about to intervene in ways that defied all logical explanation. Sofia was attempting homework at Elena's kitchen table when the familiar cold panic seized her chest again. This time, however, the sensation was different, more urgent, more desperate, accompanied by vivid images that flashed through her mind like lightning. She saw her father's silver pickup truck on a dark highway, rain hammering the windshield, headlights disappearing into sheets of water, the overwhelming certainty that he was driving straight into mortal danger. "Mama!" Sofia screamed, leaping from her chair so abruptly that her math book crashed to the floor. "We have to call Papa right now." Maria looked up from folding laundry, startled by the wild terror in her daughter's eyes. "Sofia, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." But Sofia was already grabbing the phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed her father's number. "He's in danger, Mama. He's driving in a storm, and something terrible is going to happen if we don't stop him." The phone rang 4 times before Carlos answered, his voice barely audible over howling wind and the rhythmic thump of windshield wipers working overtime. "Sofia? Baby, I can barely hear you. I'm driving through this crazy storm outside Flagstaff. The weather came out of nowhere." Sofia's heart hammered against her ribs as the images in her mind grew more vivid and terrifying. "Papa, you have to stop driving right now. Get off the road. Please just trust me and stop driving." Carlos was quiet for a moment, processing his daughter's urgent plea. Despite their recent distance, he'd heard about the fire warning and the medication incident from Maria. "Sofia, I'm only about an hour from my hotel. I think I can push through." "No!" Sofia's voice cracked with desperation. "Papa, if you love me, if you've ever loved me, please just stop. Something's telling me you won't make it if you keep driving." The raw terror in his daughter's voice cut through Carlos like a blade. He'd never heard Sofia sound so frightened, so certain of impending disaster. Against every logical instinct, he took the next exit and pulled into a truck stop, rain drumming against his vehicle like bullets. "Okay, Mika, I'm stopped. I'm safe." Sofia's legs gave out with relief, and she sank into Elena's kitchen chair, tears streaming down her face. An hour later, Carlos called back with news that left the family speechless. The highway he'd been traveling had been completely washed out by flash flooding just 20 minutes after he'd exited. 3 vehicles had been swept away by rushing water, their drivers barely escaping with their lives. The road would remain closed for 2 days. Maria stared at her daughter with a mixture of awe and growing fear. 2 impossible warnings, 2 lives saved. Sofia met her mother's gaze, with eyes that held far too much knowledge for a 12-year-old child. But the question that haunted her most wasn't how she knew these things. It was why the Virgin Mary would choose to protect the father who had abandoned their family. Word began to spread through the quiet neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Patterson from next door had witnessed Sofia's frantic phone call to her father, and when news of the flash flood reached their street, whispers followed. "That Mendoza girl knew," neighbors murmured over garden fences. "She saved her father's life from 3 states away." Elena tried to shield Sofia from the growing attention, but curious eyes followed the 12-year-old wherever she went. It was on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 month after her attack on the statue, that the third warning arrived with devastating clarity. Sofia was walking to Elena's mailbox when an overwhelming wave of nausea and dread crashed over her. The sensation was so powerful she doubled over on the sidewalk, gasping for air as terrifying images flooded her mind. The Kowalski house across the street. Mr. Kowalski working in his basement workshop, the smell of gas growing stronger by the minute, invisible death seeping through the foundation. Sofia stumbled to her feet and ran toward the Kowalski house, her heart pounding with the same desperate urgency she'd felt before the fire, before Elena's medication crisis, before her father's near disaster. She pounded on the front door with both fists, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Kowalski, you have to get Mr. Kowalski out of the basement right now. There's gas everywhere." Margaret Kowalski opened the door, her face etched with concern at Sofia's wild appearance. "Honey, what are you talking about? What gas?" But Sofia was already pushing past her, calling down the basement stairs, where the sound of power tools echoed from below. "Mr. Kowalski, you have to come up right now, please. The gas line is leaking." Her voice cracked with terror as the certainty of impending catastrophe overwhelmed her 12-year-old mind. Frank Kowalski emerged from the basement workshop, annoyed at the interruption and skeptical of a child's warning. But one look at Sofia's face, pale as death, eyes wide with genuine terror, made him pause. "What makes you think there's a gas leak, sweetheart?" Sofia grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "I can see it happening. I can see the danger. Please, just check. Please." Something in her desperation, perhaps the memory of recent neighborhood rumors about the girl's impossible warnings, made Frank reach for his phone. The gas company arrived within 30 minutes. What they found left the technician visibly shaken. A significant leak in the main gas line feeding the house had been slowly filling the basement with dangerous levels of gas. Frank's power tools had been creating sparks just 15 feet from a concentration that could have triggered a massive explosion. "Sir," the technician said, his voice grave, "if you'd kept working for another hour, maybe less, this whole house could have gone up." That evening, the Kowalski family stood in Elena's driveway, tears in their eyes, as they thanked Sofia for saving their lives and their home. Frank pressed a small wooden cross into Sofia's palm, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't understand what's happening to you, child, but I know a miracle when I see one." Sofia stared at the cross through her tears, more confused and frightened than ever. 3 warnings, 3 disasters prevented, and still the questions multiplied faster than any answers. Why her? Why these people? And what terrible responsibility was being placed on her young shoulders? The attention became unbearable. Local news had picked up the story of the girl with the warnings, and reporters began calling Elena's house at all hours. Sofia begged to stay home from school, terrified of her classmates' stares and whispers. But it was during this period of unwanted fame that the 4th warning arrived. This time targeting the person Sofia was most desperate to heal things with. Maria had been working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, trying to save money for their own apartment. The stress of the divorce, cramped living situation, and watching her daughter carry an inexplicable burden had taken its toll. She'd grown thin and pale, dismissing her fatigue as normal exhaustion. But on a grey November morning, as Maria reached for her coat to leave for work, Sofia felt the familiar cold terror grip her chest with unprecedented intensity. "Mama, don't go to work today." Sofia said quietly, her voice filled with the calm certainty that had preceded every previous warning. Maria paused at the front door, car keys in hand. "Sofia, I can't miss another day. We need the money." But Sofia stepped closer, her young face etched with desperate love and fear. "Please, Mama, you need to see a doctor today, right now. Something's wrong inside you, and if you don't go today, it might be too late." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She'd been ignoring the persistent ache in her abdomen for weeks, telling herself it was stress-related. But the way Sofia looked at her, with such profound knowledge and terror, made her hand tremble as she set down her keys. "Sofia, what do you see?" Maria whispered, kneeling to her daughter's eye level. Sofia's eyes filled with tears as she placed her small hands on her mother's cheeks. "I see you getting sicker if we wait. I see us almost losing you." Within 2 hours, they were at the emergency room. An ultrasound revealed a large ovarian mass requiring immediate surgical consultation. "Mrs. Mendoza," the surgeon explained gently, "this needs to come out as soon as possible. The characteristics suggest it could become very serious if we delay treatment." Maria felt the blood drain from her face as Sofia squeezed her hand tightly. The surgery was successful, removing a tumor that pathology later confirmed was in the early stages of malignancy. "You're incredibly fortunate," the oncologist told them. "Caught this early, with complete surgical removal, your prognosis is excellent. But if you'd waited another 6 months..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. As Sofia sat beside her mother's hospital bed that evening, something profound shifted between them. Maria reached for her daughter's hand, tears streaming down her face. "Sofia, I don't understand what's happening to you, but I know it saved my life." Sofia buried her face against her mother's shoulder, finally allowing herself to cry, not from fear, but from relief. For the first time since her attack on the statue, she wondered if these terrible warnings might actually be a gift. But if so, what was the Virgin Mary preparing her family for? December arrived with an unusual fury in Colorado. Meteorologists warned of the worst winter storm in a decade, with hurricane-force winds and dangerous lightning expected to pummel the Denver area. Elena's small house groaned under the assault as the family huddled together in the living room, watching the weather reports with growing anxiety. Sofia had been unusually quiet all day, a tension building in her chest that felt different from her previous warnings. Heavier, more urgent, like a countdown to something catastrophic. The power flickered as Elena served hot chocolate, trying to maintain normalcy while wind howled like a living thing around the house. Maria was finally home from the hospital, still weak from surgery, but grateful to be with her family. Even Carlos had driven up from Phoenix for the holidays, sleeping on Elena's couch in an awkward attempt to rebuild bridges with his daughter. The whole family was together under one roof for the first time in months, united by the storm raging outside. Sofia sat curled in Elena's armchair near the large living room window, watching lightning illuminate the sky in violent bursts. The familiar cold dread was building in her chest, but this time it felt enormous. Not a warning about someone else, but about all of them. She tried to shake the feeling, telling herself it was just anxiety about the storm, but the sensation grew stronger with each thunderclap. Something was coming for her family. Something immediate and devastating. "Everyone needs to move away from the window," Sofia said suddenly, her voice cutting through the wind's roar. The family looked at her with the mixture of respect and concern they'd developed over the past months. "Sofia, the window's fine," Carlos said gently, trying to comfort his daughter. But Sofia was already standing, her face pale with terror. "No, Papa. Right now. Everyone has to get away from the window right now." The urgency in her voice was unmistakable, the same tone that had saved Elena from poisoning, Carlos from the flood, the Kowalskis from explosion, Maria from cancer. Elena was the first to move, struggling to her feet with arthritic joints. "Come on," she said firmly, "all of us, away from the window." Carlos helped Maria stand, while Sofia grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her grandmother toward the hallway with desperate strength. They had barely reached the safety of the hallway when the world exploded. A massive lightning bolt struck the ancient oak tree in Elena's front yard with the force of divine fury. The tree, 60 years old and thick as a telephone pole, crashed directly through the living room window where they'd been sitting moments before. Glass shattered like gunfire. The tree's massive trunk crushed Elena's furniture and filled the room with branches, leaves, and the smell of burnt wood and ozone. The family stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the destruction where they'd been sitting just 30 seconds earlier. If Sofia hadn't insisted they move, the falling tree would have killed them all. As silence finally returned and the storm began to subside, Sofia looked at her shaken family and realized with startling clarity that this was the moment everything had been building toward. But now that they'd survived it, what did the Virgin Mary want from her next? In the days following the lightning strike, something profound shifted in Sofia's understanding of what had been happening to her. As insurance adjusters surveyed the destruction in Elena's living room and workers cleared the massive tree from their home, Sofia found herself drawn repeatedly to the garden. Not in anger this time, but with a growing sense of purpose she couldn't yet fully articulate. The chipped statue seemed to watch her with infinite patience, waiting for her to find the courage to approach. The neighborhood had erupted in whispers of miracle and divine intervention. 5 impossible warnings, 5 disasters prevented, 5 lives saved by a 12-year-old girl who somehow knew things she couldn't possibly know. But Sofia felt no pride in the attention, only a deep, overwhelming gratitude that her family was alive and together. For the first time since her parents' divorce, she understood that some prayers are answered in ways we never expect, through paths we never choose. Carlos had extended his stay indefinitely, sleeping on Elena's couch while helping repair the storm damage. More importantly, he'd begun having real conversations with Sofia, not the stilted, guilty exchanges of recent months, but genuine father-daughter talks about faith, fear, and the mystery of what she'd experienced. "Mija," he said one evening as they worked together to board up the broken window, "I don't understand what's happening to you, but I know it brought me home." On Christmas Eve morning, exactly 4 months after her attack on the statue, Sofia finally found the strength to return to the garden shrine. She knelt on the cold ground before the damaged marble figure, her hands trembling as she traced the chips her stones had left. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I was so angry. I thought you didn't care about us." The words came haltingly at first, then in a rush of confession and gratitude. As Sofia prayed, Elena emerged from the house carrying a small candle and her worn rosary beads. Without a word, she knelt beside her granddaughter on the frozen earth. Soon Maria joined them, still moving carefully after her surgery, but determined to be there. Finally, Carlos appeared, awkward but sincere, completing the circle around the statue that had somehow saved them all. Together, they prayed the rosary in Spanish, their voices creating clouds of vapor in the winter air. During the prayers, Sofia felt a presence she'd never experienced before. Not the urgent terror of her warnings, but something gentle and encompassing. A sense of being held, protected, chosen for something she was only beginning to understand. The Virgin Mary's marble face seemed to glow softly in the candlelight, and Sofia realized that every warning, every moment of terror had been leading to this. A broken family made whole again through love that transcended understanding. As they finished their prayers and prepared to go inside for Christmas Eve dinner, Sofia looked back at the statue one final time. The scars from her stones were still visible, but they seemed transformed now, not marks of destruction, but evidence of a journey from anger to acceptance. But as peace finally settled over her heart, one question remained that would shape everything that followed. Was this the end of her extraordinary calling, or only the beginning? 6 months later, Sofia stood in Elena's rebuilt living room, watching through the new window as spring brought fresh life to the garden. The roses around the Virgin Mary statue had bloomed more abundantly than ever before, their fragrance so rich it seemed to carry prayers on the evening breeze. The Mendoza family had found their own apartment nearby, but they gathered at Elena's house every evening for dinner and rosary, drawn together by bonds that adversity had forged and grace had strengthened. The warnings had stopped as suddenly as they'd begun. Sofia no longer experienced the cold terror or impossible knowledge that had marked those intense months. Instead, she'd discovered something far more precious, a quiet, steady awareness of divine presence that guided her through ordinary days with extraordinary peace. She'd learned that miracles aren't always dramatic interventions, but sometimes the gentle persistence of love working through broken hearts to create something beautiful. Carlos had taken a job in Denver to be closer to his family. The divorce remained final, but the bitterness had transformed into respectful co-parenting and genuine friendship. Maria's health continued to improve, and her gratitude for early detection had led her to volunteer with cancer support groups at the hospital. Elena, now 82, moved with the careful wisdom of someone who'd witnessed the impossible and chose to trust rather than understand. The damaged statue still bore the scars from Sofia's stones, but Elena had decided never to repair them. "They're part of our story now," she explained to visitors who came to hear about the miracles. "They remind us that sometimes we have to break completely before we can be made whole." The shrine had become a place of pilgrimage for neighbors and strangers alike, people seeking hope in their own dark seasons. Sofia had returned to being a normal teenager in most ways, struggling with algebra, giggling with friends, dreaming about her future. But she carried within her the profound knowledge that she'd been chosen as an instrument of protection for those she loved most. The experience had taught her that faith isn't about getting the answers we want, but about trusting the love behind the silence when our prayers seem to go unanswered. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. On quiet evenings, Sofia still knelt before the statue to pray, no longer demanding miracles, but offering gratitude for the mystery of grace that had transformed her family's greatest crisis into their deepest blessing. She understood now that her attack on the statue hadn't offended the Virgin Mary. It had opened a door for mercy to pour through, proving that divine love is strong enough to work through our anger, our doubt, and our desperate human need for hope. If Sofia's story has touched your heart tonight, write in the comments, "Sacred Protection." Let's create a prayer chain that reaches around the world, connecting all of us who believe that broken hearts can become doorways to grace. Every time I see those words, I'll know that one more soul has been reminded that we are never truly alone in our struggles. May the Virgin Mary's protection surround you and your loved ones always. Amen.